Welcome, everyone, to another episode of the All Systems Go podcast. I'm your host, Chris L. Davis, and I have with me today Spencer Forman, who is an entrepreneur, an attorney, WordPress strategy, and marketing automation expert, the founder of WP Launchify. And we're talking today about WordPress beyond websites, but not even just WordPress, more of how to build a marketing ecosystem that you own and can sell if you would like. How do you do that? What is the what are the things we should be mindful of in such an approach? And just, is it possible? Is it feasible? Am I just creating something out of nowhere and creating more complication and more difficulties? Or is this a true solution for the marketing industry? So, Spencer, welcome to the podcast. How are you doing?
Hey, Chris. And you forgot fellow Chicagoan too. But
This is true. This is true.
you and I had the pleasure of meeting last year. And by the way, thank you for inviting me on the show. And I'm glad to be here because I think today is going to be a really exceptional, value-laden conversation. It's just sort of one of those, like, the timing was a little off, but now the timing is right. And so this topic today, I'm very excited to talk with you about, because before the show, we were discussing a lot of the changes in the CRM SaaS space have made this value proposition we're going to talk about even more important for those that make their living at some level of marketing and marketing automation. And I think it's worth discussing the ownership and control as well, because in this case, there's always been, as we'll get into, I call the externalities of doing business, and my origin story is based on working in that sort of SaaS community back in the days of freemium. And I learned, and my clients and customers learned, that much like today, it's almost like old is new again. Having your business in somebody else's sandbox can be dangerous sometimes.
Yes, absolutely. And I think that's probably is what brings us to the topic, is that is the default, Spencer. There is never an additional option even placed on the table that someone could or perhaps should consider. So before we get into the good meat and potatoes of this thing, tell
Right.
us a little bit about how did you get into, I can already see kind of like a parallel with your attorney background and ownership and wanting to make sure that everything's under one. I can see that. But for you, what was that journey like into getting your hands as deep as they are in WordPress?
I mean, the super short from A to Z is
Mhm.
I knew when I was 10 years old, I was an entrepreneur, because, like many people, I come from an entrepreneurial family. Most of them were attorneys or something. They ran their businesses. But I knew early on that I had this pattern of behavior when I found people who were friends or family who had some pain point, just figuring out how to solve that pain point and then charging them, if I could, to deliver it
Mm.
was extremely exciting to me. And that was before I knew the word entrepreneur. So as I got older, that applied itself to all the various businesses I did through high school and college into young adulthood. I did go to law school and become a trial attorney. And even that was entrepreneurial, because I tried the defense side, but then worked over to the plaintiff side where it was more, performance based. What happened here was that I built for 25 years or so a big real estate practice of development and rentals and everything else. And then, as anybody knows, around 2006, 7, 8, things started to get weird. And through 2011, it turned out it was very weird. But during that time, some personal changes where I got divorced, got custody of my kids, needed to reinvent what I was going to do, because the market that I had been in, while I was not in personal peril, had changed. So it allowed me to rethink it. Well, my passion along those years had been videography, photography, and flying. And I flew a very interesting machine at the time called a microlight trike. And I felt like there must have been a cool way to share photos and videos. And at the time, that was before YouTube. I know I'm dating myself. I am
Mm.
56. It was before Facebook was popular. There was a network called Ning, and it was funded with $100 million. You know what it is, right? And it still
Yes.
exists, by the way. It's the CEO,
Wow.
Gina, is running Mighty Networks. But At the time, it was $100 million, a very energetic team of what can they do with this leftover technology from Loud Cloud. So they said, hey, anybody come build anything you want for any reason a social network. Well, for a guy from Chicago, entrepreneurial, where you don't build a hot dog stand unless you sell the hot dogs, you don't
Yeah.
give away hot dogs. I sort of did a double take and I said, you mean I get your whole infrastructure and access to your 12,500 people and I can sell anything I want? And they're like, sure. I'm like, are you sure? You're sure? And they said, yeah. And I flew out. I met a fellow pilot who was a Google developer at the time, because at the time my development skills weren't up to my marketing skills. They're a little more balanced now. And we met, we flew, we took their whole team flying, and they said, yeah, we're sure. Well, over the next 3 to 6 months, he and I just started making all these widgets and solutions, we call them tchotchkes, that everybody just said they wanted, but that Ning wasn't delivering, and we sold them.
Wow.
Well, you can see where this is going because my partner at the time predicted it. Their attorneys and the VCs eventually figured out, like, wait, explain this again. We built the stadium, we spent the money, and these two characters are making all of the actual profit because we're not charging anything. So they shut us down and blah, blah, blah. One thing led to another. I helped a few other companies from overseas who wanted to do the same thing.
Mhm.
But by then, it was very clear. The promise of freemium was a false promise. Facebook and YouTube and the bigger social networks started to take over. There was this little project, WordPress, that had social network little baby features, and it had the basic essence of what we have today.
Mhm.
And it was this thing called open source. So around 2007, 08, I started noticing it. That was where I leaped over, and starting with the features that I was familiar with, like social networking, started to basically help people understand how to build solutions for business. In the early days, it was a lot of mechanical and it was a lot of the website stuff, but there was always an underpinning, because that's my background: marketing, psychology, sales, entrepreneurship. And you could just go through the evolution of WordPress on your own. But 17 years later, WordPress is now essentially 43 to 45% of the internet. Even as we'll talk about, you don't talk about it like Home Depot and buying all the parts. The parts themselves are best in class, open source, and we can put together any solution we need, now including CRM capabilities. And so now my focal point through my consultancy and the software and the services and training that we do is to help rescue people who otherwise have a great business or aspire to have a great business in providing those services, but they're only seeing the world through the eyes of the gilded cages provided by SaaS companies, including some that we really, loved and still do in some cases, like ActiveCampaign. But there's
Yeah.
promise that they used to keep that isn't so true anymore, but you now can keep the promise for yourself by using a different way of setting it up. So that's the
Yeah.
long and short.
And that's what brings us today, right? Is
Mhm.
so just so for some background for my listeners, there Spencer was the first person that I thought of when ActiveCampaign released their new pricing, which at the time of recording is still just kind of all over the place. I'm seeing horror stories just pop up on LinkedIn, Facebook, and everything. And it's one of those things where you're satisfied with who you're with until they start to really offend you. And you're like, wait a minute, do I have to
Yeah.
take this? Hold
It-
on.
it-
I wasn't looking, I didn't have a wandering eye. But if this is how you're gonna treat me, I can't help but look at greener pastures and maybe stuff that I wasn't thinking of. And that literally happened to me. I'm a advocate of Active Campaign, an affiliate, worked there. I stand by their software, but just how the implications of this just felt so abrasive. It made me think of the question, okay, what are the other alternatives that don't involve putting money into another SaaS product? Just it was more of an exploration, Spencer, than anything. It wasn't that
right.
I was essentially saying it had to be done or I'm going to do this. I'll show them. So that's the backdrop that brings us here. And then as you were talking about your story, one of the things that jumped out to me is we're I feel like we're in the same arena and we came through two different entrances. Like you
Absolutely.
came in marketing first and then learned the dev stuff. I came in dev first and then learned the marketing stuff. And now we both play and the marketing technology arena together, figuring out best solutions for the small businesses that are trying to navigate this. And all they know, Spencer, is sign up for ClickFunnels, sign up for lead pages, sign up for it, name the tool. And somehow, somewhere, WordPress in its increased adoption and usage is also being looked at now as more complex, or plugins. And it's kind of like this narrative going on that I've never subscribed to. I've only used WordPress for all of my websites.
Right.
Never used anything else. You have issues with all technology, but nothing to the point where I'm like, I'm done with WordPress. For me, WordPress has been the most flexible and the most reliable platform in my business. So, Spencer, why have we not seen much of an alternative? Or am I wrong? Is there one when it comes to CRM software? I think they do a really great job for landing pages and even checkout now. I mean, you own software. You have software that
Yeah.
just creates whatever checkout experience you want to have. But what about the CRM? Am I even fair to expect such a thing from WordPress, or is that are we not there yet?
Well, I love that. Everything. I mean, I'm taking mental notes, and there's a lot of really, really great things to unpack. So let's start with the last question first, because that'll set the stage. First of all, the evolution of WordPress was very organic from a bunch, I mean, really small, intimate group of people that knew each other, just sitting around the campfire sharing stuff. And the
Yeah.
neat thing about it, just to set the stage for somebody who doesn't understand, what does open source mean? It's a weird concept. I'm 56, and I use that as a reference because I've been around at the birth of a lot of technology, not the least of which, let's say, Windows. Imagine if in
Mm.
1994 you had access to do whatever you wanted with the Windows operating system, and it wasn't all locked up and licensed, or DOS for that matter. Well,
Yeah.
similarly with WordPress, all of the cool things that were being created, the software is free. It's the things that people do with it, the support, the automatic updates, the services that are being sold. So over time, the capabilities and the framework that people built with matured, but in the early days, it wasn't good. So one of the things that was the last and most important pieces of the puzzle was the CRM, because there was a moment in time, Clay Collins,
Mhm.
Clay Mask was from Infusionsoft. Clay
Yeah.
Collins invented lead pages way back in the day, before Russell Brunson was out of his diapers even. And
Yes.
later my pal Rob Walling sold Drip to him. But the point was, like, having sales pages was a huge deal on a hosted platform. Wistia, my pals over there, Brennan and Chris, I was there at the beginning of that. Like, all these little bits and bobs for SaaS stuff started coming around. And Russell, who's one of the most amazing marketers, has what I'll call sufficient software, but it cannot compare in any, well, in fairness,
Yeah.
I'm old school. So Billy Mays screaming about ShamWows, or, you go Ron Popeil talking about the Pocket Fisherman. Like,
Yeah.
we were on pencil and paper. There wasn't technology. So for marketers, marketing automation people, these are all just evolutionary things. The CRM was the last and most important piece of the puzzle, because one of the software components of WordPress that I am directly involved with is WP Fusion. And that's the thing that allowed us to connect any of now more than 55 CRMs to WordPress. But there wasn't until recently a competent plugin CRM. And for those who don't know what a plugin means,
Mhm.
like a Lego block that you could put the CRM inside of your WordPress site, own it, and control it. And
Yeah.
that is the precipitating event that changes everything. Now, along the way, there was all these other things involved, but the thing that you touched upon, which is really important, like, I can think of a bunch of examples. Let's think of a text messaging. There was a
Yeah.
time when the cell phone carriers could get away with charging you 25 cents with a straight face for every text message. They
Yeah.
would be laughed out of, out of the room now. You think of now Disney and Netflix and Hulu and all the other verticals where you pay $9 to $14 a month and you get everything they ever made streaming on demand on all your devices. Versus, remember, Blockbuster, or
Yeah.
buying, you know, you had to buy a movie for $30 or rent it and then schlep it back and forth. So the evolutionary change with SaaS is now being threatened by one other thing. The market economies are membership based. Secondly, AI, which hasn't really shown its head, is going to be a factor here as well, because now a lot of the things that people would have paid for from a service standpoint are not as important, but they're now going to need somebody who's an expert in operating the robots or integrating the robots. But the final piece, which you touched upon, which is the basis of this conversation, is it really necessary in 2023 and beyond to get into a marriage, and that's really what it is, with a company that has all of the power and all the control? Because my origin story of Ning was an example. Even in the old days, if you have a corporate entity that has its own interests, they will throw everybody under the bus at a moment's notice. And we've seen this recently, like, for example, with the unnecessary, but just to do it to bump the share price of Facebook and Google and all these other companies laying off 12,000, 20,000 when they made $17 billion in profit last quarter, right? They didn't do it because they need the money. They did it because they're there to please the shareholders. So
Yeah.
when you're working with a SaaS company versus WordPress, you're always with what I call an externality. And in the solutions that we now box, people aren't going to tinker. Just here's the features ready to go that give you all the same power and control and more that you would have gotten on a platform. But now that's one less externality for your business or your clients, because there's only two left, and we can talk more details. There's always going to be the payment gateway, because nobody should be
Yeah.
taking credit cards, Stripe,
Yep.
PayPal, whatever. Number two is going to be SMTP. We know from the marketing world, there has to be white label, talk to each other, get all geeky about it, but like, you can't just randomly throw up a server and hope that mail is going to be delivered.
Yep.
Those two externalities, you're agnostic to one or the other, because if one of those relationships go bad, no big deal, switch. But when
Yep.
you're talking about putting your business in a CRM, man, that is sticky stuff to get out if you've really built a business around it. And don't even get me started for, we're not picking on them, but Entreport and all the stuff like they sell, they try to get people to sell inside of there. Infusionsoft try to get people to, like, if you're selling inside of your CRM, you might as well, I don't know, like, open up your bank accounts to the neighbors or something, because there's no control you have over them.
Yeah, and again, the big piece is there was once a time where this was the norm and
Yeah.
this was acceptable and this was a benefit. Like you said, I remember when text messaging was new. You saved sending that message for when you really needed to send it. Whereas now it's just like, okay, emoji and response. There was none of that. Like,
I mean, when it's
you
the only game in town, you use what you've got. And, we
that's
joke
it.
about it, but I have a pad of paper and a pen right next to me, because even in the world that we've got where I use open AI and ChatGPT, like, I still use some of those old school things, because
Yeah,
it's a difference between what you need to pay for versus what you could pay for, versus most people just don't understand, because it's a lot of details. What's
yeah,
available to me? I mean, that's a full-time
yeah.
job.
Yeah. And just to catch everyone up, um, just because I don't want to assume any intelligence and don't want you to feel like, hey, this conversation is not for me. When we're talking about your payment gateway, it's literally the ability for somebody to put in their credit card information on your website or your web asset, and you be able to process that payment and the money enter into your bank account. When
Yeah.
Spencer talks about SMTP, that's the ability to send emails. You all have this. You're just paying a company to do all of those things. And the question or the potential, the opportunity, the possibility that I'm putting on the table is, what if you could control it? And what if that control would come at a fraction of a cost?
Right. Can I
Because
can
your
I can I
CRM is
interrupt you
very
on that point?
important.
Because
Yes.
you just touched upon, like, the ring the bell part. The
Yep.
thing that's killing most people right now, I mean, no, that's a
Hmm.
bad word. The thing that's hurting people's business right now is that ActiveCampaign and many other SaaSes decided, coming out of this post-COVID bubble of prosperity, to just put their foot down on people. And
Hmm.
when you're on a hosted SaaS, they charge you per contact.
Yeah.
And that's just not necessary, because just like text messaging, I assure you, from a technologist standpoint, it costs them nothing, whether you have 1 or 10 million people. When you own and control it, your CRM, guess what? That particular plugin could cost you anywhere from $0 to $129 for the whole year.
Yeah.
Versus what does it cost you on ActiveCampaign every time you add another contact? And they're really taking advantage of it because you know why? They see the future.
Yeah.
They understand that this methodology will be evolving. And that's one of the other secondary benefits. Not only do you free yourself from somebody's just raising prices arbitrarily, like the cable company or something, but also you set yourself up for a foundation. That's what I say to people. We put that concrete in the ground. I used to be a developer. If you put the right foundation in, you can build a high rise or a 2-story, you can build anything you want. But if you don't start at that foundation by owning it and controlling it, everything you build thereafter is going to have to be torn down at some point and moved when the relationship goes bad.
Yeah. Yeah. And I also want to mention, you work with Jack, WP Fusion, and here at Automation Bridge, we love, with a capital LOVNE, the plugin, the process of development, Jack, his care and the performance. For those of you, if you want to hear me just really go in depth about my love for WP Fusion, you can go to asgpremium.com, subscribe to the premium podcast. There's an entire episode
Well,
dedicated
Jack, I mean,
to
first of all,
WP Fusion.
Jack himself, as a human being, one of the most beloved characters in WordPress, but he and I started our relationship over 5 years ago now, when it was very infancy. He originally, I foisted myself on him basically, and he retained me professionally to help
Mm.
him position the early product. And I tell this story, but I have to say it in a way that apparently some people are sensitive when I say this. His product, I immediately saw as a dream come true. I used to say it a
Mm.
slightly different version, but when I saw it, I was so excited. It was like, right? Couldn't contain myself. And he retained me professionally, but it very quickly evolved into what I'll call a symbiotic relationship. So
Yeah.
I'm basically the chief product marketer or, customer satisfaction person. I make myself available for free calls and have for all these years. And Jack and I talk fluently. There's a couple other team members that he's hired, but Jack is just an outstanding business person and thought leader in that regard. And the product is something that has allowed us, the rest of us, to do the thing that I just described, which is, and I'm pleasantly surprised to say, it still stands alone in this regard. It allows you to connect any of the 55 SaaS CRMs plus any number of outside things into your ecosystem of WordPress, where those other components can also talk to each other. And I use this little show and tell. It's just like regular marketing automation. Tags and custom fields on the user allow people to go on a custom journey, and then that synchronizes to the CRM. But as we'll talk about maybe a little more, the CRM doesn't have to be outside. If the CRM's
Yeah.
inside, now it's in the box. You own it, control it for yourself, for your client.
Yes. Okay. We're here now, Spencer. We're here. CRM inside of the box. I
Right.
have a website. Oh, I want to start sending email. I want to start email marketing. They say that's one of the most profitable marketing channels. I want to do that. Let me go outside of my website and go find a SaaS tool.
Right.
What if I didn't have to? What are some of those options, and what kind of experience? Am I, Spencer, are you signing me up for some off-brand
No.
third
No.
level experience where I don't get the cream of the crop in my contacts, experience some version, some bootlegged
Right.
version of
No,
email
no. I mean,
marketing?
this is really good, by the way. That I think that's the best part about uh, our relationship, the way we handle ourselves. I mean, I think I mentioned this in our other conversations, but I'm old school. My grandfather was a local attorney as well, and he was a neighborhood attorney, but he taught me, my father in his own way as well, your name and reputation are what you come into the world with. And that's the only
Yeah.
thing that your job is to preserve or to make better. And for me, I am very outspoken. Many of the other things I do in the WordPress space and media and otherwise, I am the kid in the Emperor's New Clothes story, telling it like it is. And if I'm wrong, I encourage somebody who says I'm wrong. I do two things. I publicly just like put them on a pedestal, and I give them a little digital pony, by the way. Especially I go like, here's your pony. And some people have earned a lot of ponies, but I also like to do that because to me, it's not a matter of being precious. It's a matter of, I
Yeah.
want the facts. I'm a Scorpio. I need the facts as they are. So in the WordPress space, this small community has been notorious, and I've been there the whole time, of making sure that if something isn't kosher, that everybody knows about it, right? If there's something not right,
Mm,
and the software has to comply with certain things with regard to how it works in the general stack of other stuff. But more importantly, I'll give you the very brief story. I am pleasantly shocked and surprised to say that there's really only one plugin that does the CRM properly in WordPress, and it's called FluentCRM. I'm not trying to keep any, you can go find
okay.
it at fluentcrm.com, but I want to
Okay.
explain why that's not your best choice necessarily.
Okay.
Shah Jahan Jewel and his team also work directly with me, much like the story of Jack, because they recognize they write a few plugins, Fluent CRM, Fluent Forms, Fluent SMTP, a few other things that by themselves are like a component you'd find on the shelf in Home Depot. And they
Mm,
recognize, as did Jack, it's good to provide something that people can do it yourself. But the majority of the market doesn't want to go to Home Depot and buy parts to fix their toilet or to build something. They want somebody to come out with an orange vest on that says, here's the thing you were thinking you needed, ready to go.
yep.
So, unlike the SaaS CRMs, you have complete ownership and control. The feature set continues to evolve because they, under Shah Jahan's leadership, have been growing and very, very responsive to all the things that myself and others have said we need for this to work properly, which, by the way, is quite a different experience than trying to get a response from the customer support of a SaaS company, right? Like, gee, it'd be
Yeah.
really nice to put it on the list. We'll talk to you later, right? Here, especially through, again, I like to say some of my direct involvement, we have carved out essentially a small stack of plugins that's based on using that as the CRM. I use it myself. We use it ourselves. Our customers,
Mm,
unless there's a special exemption, and I'll go into some of those, we recommend they use it. Why? Because number one, ownership and control. Number two, total cost ownership. It's $129 for the retail license, or it could be free, like I say, in some situations, like we will talk about. But the
yeah.
point is the software just does everything you need it to do and more without all of the things that are downsides. And there's no catch to it. The issue is most people just spend way too much money in the cookbook trying to figure out how to make a souffle the first time, maybe the third, fourth, 10th, 12th, 15th. They might go over that recipe 47 times till that thing doesn't collapse. And we say it doesn't have to be that hard. Just like a
Mm,
SaaS, there's a way to just come in and pay a certain amount per month or just full ownership, and it's already curated into what you need. And that's the future that is being offered by most of the WordPress hosting companies and everything else, except
yeah.
they don't really understand what we're talking about because ours is based primarily marketing automation first, membership, e-commerce, sales funnels, the things that are the promise of the ClickFunnels or the CRMs. That's what we're delivering. We're not as worried about things that are easy like design and page layout. That's been done, and there's a million ways to do that.
I
So
got it.
yes, the promise is one that I would put my name and reputation on and do every day. And I feel that you're on the same page with that as well, because it's not some false promise. It's demonstrated by many of the features that we can go into. One thing I'll just put a pin in is
Yep.
Fluent CRM allows you with WP Fusion to have what I call a single source of truth setup. We use this ourselves. So as
Okay.
you go to spencerforman.com, you can see I have several hubs and I have lots of other social and other professional sites. I have one website at 1WD.TV. That is my, like, nothing happens in public. Behind it is a Fluent CRM setup where all the other sites talk to remotely. It's $129 a year for the CRM. I can have a million people all going through my single source of truth where the emails come out of, the marketing automations. And that's something that everybody dreams of, but you would have to pay an arm and a leg to go to a SaaS to do.
Yeah. Yeah. So I've been researching this, and again, if you're in the Automation Bridge community, you can leave a comment under this episode if there's a particular tool that I'm about to mention and you're like, "Hey, what's that?" Or if you just have one that I haven't mentioned. And the ones that have come up the more prominently are Autonomy by Funnel Kit. They used to be WP Funnels, I believe. I had one of their co-founders on the podcast. I need to have Jewel on here. I
Yeah,
need to get Jewel
Damon
on the
Dietz,
podcast.
who's a
Yes.
wonderful entrepreneur, but
Yes.
I want to I don't want to say anything other than complimentary. I want to clarify. We just talked about this on our membership mastermind show.
Mm-hmm.
Autonomy does not exist or do things outside of what it's supposed to
Ooh,
do in
yeah.
WP funnels. That's a big difference. Or now
Yes.
funnel
It
kit, they call it. It's a
doesn't
big difference.
stand on its own. Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
it's literally only made for that. It doesn't do
Yep.
what normal CRMs do.
Yes. And then the other one that has come up, my buddy Chris Badgett at Lifter
Okay. Lift
LMS told me
LMS, yeah.
about
Mutual.
Groundhog. Groundhog
Well,
is the other one.
Adrian
And
Toby and his family.
okay.
And again, Chris and I go way back, and everybody on his team, and Kurt also does. Kurt's on the team. He's with me at Membership Mastermind as well.
Okay.
So Adrian and I were good colleagues. He was also on WP Tonic. We had a conversation about 2 years ago. I can't speak for Adrian. He's young. He's brilliant. His family's involved in the business. He's doing amazing stuff. But back then, I'm going to characterize it like this. I said I would like to see the direction of that plugin go as a feature of the stack of other things, just like Fluent decided to.
Mm-hmm.
He seems to have responded in a way where at the time he said he is more looking to build a platform plugin, and his pricing and his model. And there are several other examples of this in the WordPress space. Nathalie Lusser and her husband have an amazing Access Ally, which is a connected only to 2 CRMs plugin, right? It only goes to Infusion Software. It only goes to ActiveCampaign.
Yep.
But I have talked nicely as I can because she's an amazing human being and successful. That is a gilded cage. So I'm going to say here publicly, I'm not going to speak for Groundhog, but I can't endorse Groundhog because all the things that I saw about it was to be a framework. And when you put yourself in a framework, it's the same thing as putting yourself into a SaaS. And that's different because here's the main distinction.
Okay.
Let's say today you used FluentCRM and you just had you know what, this relationship isn't working out with me. No big deal. Just connect to another CRM, maybe Sendinblue or something. Get everything back together again because you get WP Fusion. You can't do that in a framework. You can't do that when you're using Autonomy with WP Funnels or Funnel Kit. You can't do that in, you see what I'm saying? Like, in other words, I advocate each plugin be the best feature it can be and not have these external limitations or gilded cage elements to it, because that is like in the metaphor of Legos. Imagine if Legos didn't snap together. You had to melt plastic, or you can only use this Lego block only with this Lego block. No, any Lego block with any Lego block, and you can take one out and throw it away and start over. And that's the future. That's the point of it, isn't it? Right? Like if you said, I want to be single person, and by the way, I'm going to sign a contract for 10 years to be in a relationship, that's really the same as being married, you know? So.
Yeah. Just worded differently. So it sounds like, when we're looking at WordPress, aside from ownership, which is inherent because WordPress does not exist unless you have your own server and you've installed it. You also bring up the functionality of being able to interchange parts. So, if my CRM needs change, I'm not stuck with this, what I call the great migration over into something else, because that's one part I can just unplug and put another one in place.
Let's talk about that, because that goes all the way back to the origin story of the Ning and Social Go and the other, SaaS freemium products that I was working with.
Yes.
Imagine you've got some computer from the 60s with those reel-to-reel stuff. Or even better, for most of us, imagine you had an 8-track tape or a mixtape from your high school, or in my cases, whatever, 800 years ago, like a cassette tape. You know what your biggest problem is? Where can you find something that can play that, right? Similarly, if you're on a SaaS or a framework versus the WordPress stack that I'm suggesting we can offer ready to use, already hosted, because the hosting is a commodity anyway. The problem people have is there's nowhere to go with it. So in other words, in the old days with like Ning, take your data with you. Where? What are you going to do with this data? It's just a JSON file that's gobbledygook to most human beings. With WordPress, especially a curated stack, you know what the best promise we make that makes people want to stay with us forever? It's an open door relationship. You start with this thing today, just doing your business, just like a SaaS. We prevent you from breaking a bunch of stuff just by being here to tell you this is a good idea or not. If you ever want to end the relationship, take it with you to go. And you know where you just go?
Mm,
You go to any other host and you're good to go because it's WordPress. It's self-contained in the box. You
yeah.
can't do that. Like, where are you going to take ActiveCampaign data? Like, you have to rewrite all of your automations. You have to port all of the stuff. You have to copy paste. And that's especially true if you were using, let's say, sales pages in Entreport or, Infusionsoft or, God forbid,
Yeah.
HubSpot, for the expense that they charge every month. You're building yourself into that gilded cage. So that's something that's important. Number one, people don't have to worry about ever where they're going to go if they wanted to leave. But number two, it's documented so easily. Like, half the internet uses WordPress. So any Tom, Dick, Harry, Susie could help you from a Craigslist ad versus where are you going to find an expert to help you porting some esoteric plugin or SaaS thing?
Yeah, people make a living off of that, charging top tier for it. Let me ask you this, because so now you've kind of introduced me to, it can be more than a possibility, it can be a thing. Let
No,
me
it is
put
a
it
thing. That's
together
the point.
for
It's a
for
thing.
everyone, right? Like, this is already existing.
Press
You're
a button,
telling
you
me,
can own it today.
you're telling me, I just want my listeners to follow me,
Mhm.
Spencer, I could go this route, have my website, landing pages, CRM, and payment processor in one package, pay a fraction of the cheapest CRM out there, and lose no functionality, and be able to run my marketing and own it.
Yeah, and yes, and as a bonus, you have the best relationship in the world because that's what you're paying for. In other words, the software, as I started with, is free, but you're never really buying the software anyway. You're buying a relationship. So instead of going to the flea market on a Sunday and wandering the booths, hoping to meet the right people to put together something for Sunday dinner, you go to one stop. And obviously, you and I are talking, I'm at the center point of this because this has been the problem I've been helping to solve in WordPress.
Yeah.
Moving it from a flea market to a press a button. Now, the cost depends on what you want to do for the relationship. We have things that start at free. It could be $19 a month. It could go up to something like $300 a month, or it could even be a custom project. But when you add up the expenses of what it would cost you on a SaaS thing and the expertise and any other training and esoterics, 100% every single time, the personal relationship you're paying for, which means, like, literally, let's talk on Zoom one-to-one or email, like somebody who
Hmm.
knows what you want to
Hmm.
do, plus the software, plus the ready to go, it's always less than if you just paid third-party services. And that's the difference, going back to my metaphor of, remember when we had to pay 25 cents for every text message, how ridiculous it is? Or remember when we had to buy a movie for $30 and now my kids have 10,000
Yeah.
choices?
Yeah.
Because they're not selling that anymore. They realize people aren't stupid. And your audience and my audience isn't stupid either. So that when these companies like Gumroad and ActiveCampaign and other ones start laying people off and putting their foot down on people on pricing, now there's an alternative, but you don't have to become technically oriented. We
Yeah.
just have it ready to go, just like a normal SaaS. You just start the relationship from free to $20 a month up to 300, and you get something that at the end of the year you win because you own it, control it, your client owns, control it. And one last thing, because you got me so excited, one of the biggest solutions that we actually do with this, and
Okay.
it's just, I need to clarify this, most of our best clients are what I call San Diego Mafia followers of the digital marketer crowd, right? So, Perry Belcher and the whole crew over there have for years been putting out great content, a digital marketer, but they always used to be based on Infusionsoft and so on and so forth, right?
Sure. Sure.
Ryan Dice and the rest. Even Russell Brunson with ClickFunnels. But that whole thing, everything they're sold was based upon like getting you to pay huge numbers in the early days for the software.
Hmm.
The thing you did with it was, I like to call a franchisor franchisee model. Let's say you have something, you and I both have this. I can teach people to be the intermediaries, right? I did this for very famously
Sure.
a bookkeeper client who has one of the best He had people pay him 3,000, 3,600 to learn to be a bookkeeper. And then at the end, it would be like, oh, shucks, just to get yourself a website and do what I taught you.
Yeah.
But in the end, what he paid me for to bring in was to make it where people get out of his training and they've got their own ready to go engine, their own ready to go system. So let's say
Yes.
you're a professional marketer and you have a bunch of clients. As I just alluded to, we can also teach you, show you, set up, give you a system that you can create a recurring revenue business with delivering the engine that people are essentially paying you for, but not have to be technically oriented. So an agency or a marketing expert can have 100 clients all with this marketing engine for themselves, but you're able to, resell it. And that's something that's really lost on most people. They just think of it like my one little site, but like that's where the real money is in this, because everybody gets the same promise and the same deliverable. They'll
Yeah.
still own and control it, and ta-da.
Yeah, I think it's appropriate, everyone, for me to make the invitation to you live here on the spot, I should say, here on the podcast. Spencer, I want you to come and show us. I want you to
I would
come
love that.
and
I would love
show
that.
us what this would look like. Eliminate any confusion. So what we'll do is we're gonna have you come into the community and do a private session where we can see all these parts together, because here, as you're talking, Spencer, here's what I know. So I worked at ActiveCampaign. I saw what the customer said. I've been consulting and coaching for I don't know how many years. I know where people are struggling. People will give me access to their CRM in ways that I'd be like, man, you didn't even really check me out. That's like giving your baby to a stranger. There's a lot of valuable information that you might have wanted to, whatever.
Right.
But when I go in here, 80% of the time, Spencer, maybe even more, they're using a fraction, maybe 10 to 15% of that
Right.
platform, but they're paying for the promise of it all. So I've learned that basic marketing executed consistently will produce more results than advanced platforms that I don't know how to properly leverage. And that's what's appealing to me, is that you
Mhm.
can give them everything that they need to get their basic marketing and beyond, but just basic marketing in place for a cost that's not going to break the bank. Right now, again, at the time of recording this, I mean, prices of eggs are astronomical. Like everything is just
And
going.
I love eggs, by the way. I had to go
Oh
to
my
Costco to buy like
god.
the big box, but yeah.
Yes, everything is rising. The cost is like something's going to happen. I don't know. I'm not an economist. I don't know.
Well,
But
it's a natural, like I sorry to interrupt you, but like I
no,
like to
keep
call
going.
it a snow globe situation,
Yeah.
right? Because when you're around long enough, as I've been, you see every 10 years or so a snow globe gets shaken up.
Yep.
That's the opportune moment, because
That's
the
the yes.
imbalance of the post-COVID thing and the corporate ownership thing and the NFT and the crypto thing and now the Twitter thing, like all these things come together to shake it up. But now we've got this technology. And I do want to interrupt your train of thought, but like to your point, I would love to show people, because the situation that exists right now is that the tools have always been there, but they've always required somebody to just like go back to that BMW. Like, well,
Yeah.
here's your BMW in a kit that you get to, put together at home. And like,
Yep.
no, I really just want to. And the other part of it is, how do people make money in a new economy? Well, with the AI and so forth, I've done some recent videos on this. These are just new versions of tools that will require people with expertise, so that now there's a layer of what I call human beings teaching the people one step below them what they need to do. So instead of being sad, like, oh, I'm out of a job, it's like, wait a second. Everybody's now going to have some AI, and the normal
Yeah.
business owner, shop owner, whatever, they need somebody to implement that for them using the other layer. And so what we and I personally have aimed to deliver is literally the same thing I've been doing since I was 10 years old. Is that I looked for things that, the kids at camp didn't have a comic book. And so I rented comic books, right? So in today's world, it's that there's technology that's always been a little too complex, a little too
Yep.
expensive. The
Yep.
corporate interests are all shaking up the snow globe. That makes an opportunity for anybody who has, let's say, people skills to create a new business around using tools that doesn't require them to be technical. But you just
Yep.
have to be one step ahead the person next door to you. But that's how it works anyway, right? Like, hey, Chris, what's
Yeah.
a good movie? What's a good restaurant? What did you do
Yep.
today?
Yep.
What's your favorite iPhone app? That's human nature.
Yeah, and I think the big piece here is the fact that the technological advancements have enabled this. Because I've been a WordPress user for a while, and even the themes. I started off using Genesis framework where I had to code PHP into
Right,
modules
right.
and do all of that. To the drag and drop builders now, it's just like, wow, technology
Yeah,
has really gone to a place. And again, I know that there's new SaaS products out there really shaking up the space too. I know Go High Level is one where people are using and saying, "Oh, look, I can sell it as my own." There's something appealing, and I just don't see a lot of noise, good noise around it, Spencer.
right.
So I'm excited to have you on to show us exactly what this will look like. Don't worry, listeners, if you're a part of the community, you'll have access to this. If you want to join the community, make sure you go to asgpremium.com/community. But just give you the floor, Spencer. Put it together and show us. Some people, this may be their first time hearing about Fluent CRM, and they may have been typing as we're talking and like, how does he do it? He said so just a good run through of it all would be amazing. Spencer, I could talk to you for days. For those who I just exposed to you, where
Right.
can they go and learn, find out more, connect, get some more of this wonderful WordPress insight? Where should they go?
Okay, I appreciate that. And by the way, I just want to say I couldn't be more excited because, like I said, we talked a year ago and this was all coming up, but now things move fast and now we're back. And I
You're
think
here.
that's kind of kismet anyway, right? And the simplicity part, I just want to emphasize, I couldn't agree more
Yeah.
that I'm a pilot and you learn to fly with just visual. But if you see a 747, a big airplane in modern Airbus, they have a million gauges. Most people have that feeling in a CRM or whatever. You don't need that. For the stuff we're talking about, basic marketing is just putting somebody in your system, making sure they're tagged at least at a minimum so you don't lose them for future things. And then we can baby step you. Like just have one email to follow up. But you get so lost in the fact I'm paying $500 a month. What am I going to do? Okay. So we're going to talk about that.
Yes.
And I do
Yes.
feel like there's the thing that I already do and what you already do come together like peanut butter and chocolate. We've got like a delicious treat for people like Reese's peanut butter cups. You know what I mean? Like they were meant to be together. All right. So
Yes.
spencerforman.com. It's in the title here. No E in Forman. I have the three
FORM.
pillars of what I do. WP Launchify Consulting, Launch Flows, which is the software that I write that complements our WP Fusion plugin and WooCommerce, but it's just one
Yes.
feature that handles the sales funnel behavior. And then the third
Yeah.
thing is the free and fun training and other educational stuff at WP Launch Club. If you scroll down or click the, what's new content, you'll see I publish almost every day something exactly along the lines of what we just discussed and what your audience would be interested in, including live shows and videos. And I think it'll give people a good flavor of, man, I hope they feel the same as I'm saying, that like I just tapped into a gold mine here, because this will really change the leverage. There's
Mm.
virtually zero risk. There's no obligation or cost. I'm not selling something. I'm selling the information that this has always been here. And now the timing is right to reconsider how one goes about doing the stuff you're doing on
Yeah.
an expensive platform.
Absolutely. Well, I
Yeah.
can't thank you enough, Spencer. I'm so excited. Like I'm ready. I feel like we should just go right into it.
Well, it'd be great.
Right
We set
now.
it up next time where we'll have the right. I'll put
Yep.
together like a version of this that really touches on those points you brought out that are important to your
Yeah.
audience, because it could do everything, but we don't want to show everything. That would be too confusing. Let's just start with the
Yeah.
basics.
With the basics. Yeah. So we'll have that training underway for you all. By the time you all hear this podcast, it'll be ready. So you can go and log into the community or check out now and join the community. Spencer, thank you so much. It's always good to connect with you, to reconnect with you, to stay connected with you on LinkedIn and see all your posts. And just you're my guy. You're my guy with all things WordPress. If there's a question of a plugin, all I have to do is, hey, does Spencer recommend it?
I
What
want
does
to give a
Spencer
shout out, by the way, because we're both relationship based and our
say?
audiences are
Hmm.
precious to us. I mean, that's my most valuable commodity outside my name. Shout out to Carrie Krieger, Dr. Carrie Krieger, who is a mutual client,
Yeah,
I would say now friend. He's
absolutely.
been working with me for years now, and he's a great success story for both the mechanical and the other stuff I offer and the marketing and other stuff that you offer. And he's the one that
Yeah.
actually encouraged us to get together in this timely fashion. So
Absolutely.
shout out to
Yes.
Carrie.
Shout out to Carrie. And by the way, he's a certified partner in the nonprofit space. If you're trying to leverage technology more effectively for your nonprofit, Carrie is the man. Automationbridge.com. You can find him in our directory. Reach out to him, let him know you heard the podcast, and we both pointed you there.
Absolutely.
Again, Spencer, thank you so much, man.
Thanks,
I
Chris.
greatly appreciate it, and I'll see you online.
I'm looking forward to it.